In this presentation, I am going to show you how to fillet a whole salmon using an Uluaq, traditional Yupik knife. The materials needed to fillet the salmon are 2 pans, a cutting board that is at least as large as the salmon, disposable gloves, an Uluaq, a knife sharpening steel or rock, thawed whole salmon, and a table. I'd like to remind you that a Uluaq is a traditional Yupik knife. When sharpening your Uluaq, it is important to take safety precautions. Make sure that when you sharpen your Uluaq, you are not sharpening in the direction of which your hands and fingers are, so you don't cut yourself. Also, when cutting the whole salmon, don't place your hands or fingers in the direction of which you are cutting, and be careful. You also want to check the best by date of your salmon if you had bought it from the store, and use that salmon on or before the best by date. When using wildly caught salmon, make sure that it was fresh when frozen. It's important to use rubber gloves or disposable gloves so you don't come in contact with tapeworms. It's also important that you know that you're not latex allergic, since this can create a reaction. And you also want to wash your hands even if you're using rubber gloves after handling the salmon, since salmon bones can puncture rubber gloves, and your nails can also puncture rubber gloves. To prepare, you need to thaw the frozen salmon for at least 5 hours. And you can thaw the frozen salmon in one of the pans. When sharpening the Uluaq, you firmly hold the steel or rock in the less dominant hand and stroke the Uluaq onto the steel sharpener or rock at an angle about 4 to 5 times. Repeat with the other side of the blade until you have reached the desired sharpening level. Steps to cutting the salmon. Lay out your materials on a clean table except for the sharpening steel or rock, since you have already done this to prepare. Put your disposable gloves on before touching the salmon. Remove packaging of the whole salmon. Then place the whole salmon onto the cutting board. As I have in this picture, hold the Uluaq in the dominant hand. My dominant hand is my right hand. I would also like to add that this was the last whole salmon that we had, and it did not have a head or tail, and its insides were empty and cut. Steps to cutting the salmon continued. Use the Uluaq to cut the tail and head of the salmon. When cutting the head, use your less dominant hand to hold the head right under its gills, placing the salmon on its back and cutting using the Uluaq to cut right underneath the gills. Also, hold the salmon with your less dominant hand and cut the tail right above the fin. You can either store, cook, or discard the head and tail. When cutting the belly of the salmon, lay the salmon on its side. Then, facing the stomach towards the dominant hand with the Uluaq, you will hold the salmon with your less dominant hand and cut the stomach from the top of the salmon where the head used to be to the small hole next to the fins at the end of the salmon. There may be eggs in the contents of the salmon, so you may want to store them, Cook them or throw them away as desired, but the rest of the contents need to be thrown away. To cut the first fillet, make sure that the salmon's back is facing your dominant hand with the uluaq. Then you will hold the salmon with your less dominant hand while cutting just above the backbone until the whole spinal bone is showing. You will then flip the salmon around and repeat, but cut past the spinal bone until the fillet is free. This is your first fillet and you can place it in the second clean pan. Try not to cut any bones during the first fillet and the second fillet. To cut the second fillet, flip the salmon. Hold the first half of the fillet up while cutting the rest of the fillet. Be careful not to cut any fish bones, or they will stick to your fillet. Then you can place the second fillet in the same pan as the first fillet. You can then throw away this bone that was in the middle, the spinal bone, and the rib bones that are connected to it. And there you have it. The fillet of a whole salmon is complete. Thank you.